Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the oh-so-beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. We have three wonderful guests for you today. First, Dr. Liz Bayardelle will be here to celebrate her book, Clean Your Plate, 13 Things Good Parents Say That Could Ruin Kids' Lives. We'll also be joined later on by Steve Petzinger and Selai Akbar-Hussain. They are here to celebrate their picture book, Bob the Banana Goes Bad. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to make sure that you know that you are invited to subscribe to our show. You can find the Reading with Your Kids podcast wherever you find your podcast. Some of our favorite podcasting platforms, the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Ghana, Himalaya. You get the point. Wherever you find your podcast, you can find the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And we would so love it if you would subscribe. Joining us right now from Orange County in California, our guest today is the author of Clean Your Plate, 13 Things Good Parents Say That Ruin Kids' Lives. Please welcome to the Reading with Your Kids podcast, Dr. Liz Bayardelle. Dr. Liz, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
I am wonderful. Really excited to have you here. Tell us about, I guess I should start. What's I probably said all 13 of these things that ruin my kids' lives. Thankfully, they're okay. But why don't we start by you telling us what inspired you to write this book?
The first thing I have to tell everyone is it is comedic hyperbole. You are not actually ruining your children's lives. That's why I made sure to include the good parents in there, because otherwise no one would have bought it, because no one wants to admit to ruining their kids' lives. I actually had one of my reviews on Amazon is someone who reviewed the book, and they're like, this is a great book. I got a lot out of it, but I made the mistake of not telling my wife that I ordered it, and she thought that one of our kids had passive-aggressively gotten it for her as a sign that she had ruined their life. So for the sake of your marriage, tell your spouse if you're ordering this book.
And for the sake of your kids, too.
Yeah, exactly. But these are all common parentisms, and we've all seen the Pinterest saying, like, mirror, mirror on the wall, I'm my mother after all. And you're going to hear these coming out of your mouth, and you just, like, try to catch the speech bubble before it comes out, but it's in vain. It's stuff like, do you need any money? Or get straight A's, don't be a quitter, sit still, don't hit, win your game today, go give your aunt a hug. Like, all of these are different chapters in the book, and it's stuff we all say. None of these sounds like a big offender, but there's kind of what the simile or the metaphor I use is we've all seen the prescription drug commercial on TV. This is a headache medicine, and oh, by the way, it might cause growing a leathery tail, sprouting dragon wings, breathing fire, sudden death, combustion, and so it's meant for one thing, but it causes all these unwelcome side effects. And I kind of think these statements are kind of similar. They're meant for one thing, but there are psychological side effects that they might cause. So in the book, for each chapter, I take 13 statements, each one is a chapter, and I go over why well-meaning, good, well-educated parents say these, because there is a reason why they come out of our mouths, and then what the side effects could be, and then kind of how to mitigate them.
So let's talk about one of these things that great parents say with all the best intentions that could cause really negative consequences for their kids.
Do you have a specific one in mind?
But my favorite number is number 7. Why don't we start with that?
Ironically enough, it's bullet listed on mine, but number 7 would be give your aunt a hug, which is actually one of my biggest soapboxes that I love to hop on. It sounds feminist, but I'm raising a son now. My littlest is 1. He's a boy, and I am just as vigilant about this with him as I am with my 2 older girls. But you see, give your aunt a hug, And everyone has been to the family function where your normally outgoing child all of a sudden turns into a stone gargoyle amongst people you really want them to be kind to because they're related. They're like, no, go give her a hug, go. But what we're actually doing, and most of you parents know where I'm going with this, is we are signing away their concept of bodily autonomy, and they are being forced to show affection. And not only is it forced to touch someone that they might not even want to touch, but it's also saying someone else can tell you when to show affection. And that's a really dangerous message, because you might want to be able to say, like, oh, go get her on to hug when your kid is 3, but then grow your kid up mentally, and when they're in high school on their first date with someone, you don't want that person to be able to dictate how, when, or if they show affection. So that's my biggest thing there. And with my kids, it's like, go say hi. And they do have to acknowledge people's presence when they walk into a room. They can't just like walk in on their iPhone, like grab an apple and walk out of the room without acknowledging the presence of other human beings.
We've talked about this issue related to sensory issues, that some kids just don't, because of whatever reason, they might be on the autism spectrum. It's like, it can actually hurt some kids to be hugging. My family is bicultural. My background is Irish, and a bunch of those other white nations up in Europe. And my wife's family is from Puerto Rico, and in Puerto Rico, it is, the etiquette is to give your relatives a kiss in the cheek. Is there a way that we can, a family can kind of respect that, but also kind of give their kids, the idea that they do have permission to decide who, can touch them?
Well, I think a little forethought is necessary, and I have the same scenario. I am literally as Caucasian as you can get without looping back around again. Both of my parents can trace their ancestry straight back to the Mayflower, which is weird for a bunch of reasons. And then my husband is half Haitian, half Dominican. So when I go to the doctor's office and fill out forms, it's like, what race are they? Black? Yes. Hispanic? Yep. White? Uh-huh. It's a very confusing scenario. So we've had to, ahead of time, have conversations like, hey, here are the expectations for this family function. Here's how mom's family works. Here's how dad's family works. Here are your options. And like, I've even found it useful just like marriage-wise, because when we were first meeting the families, there's obviously like, okay, please educate me as to your family's intricacies, because it's going to be very different from mine. Like his, there's music playing all the time and everyone's talking and it's really loud. And for me, I came from one of those like wear headphones to listen to music by yourself in an empty room type families. So I think it's really helpful on a bunch of fronts, not even just from a physical contact front, because they're like, hey, when we walk in, you want to say hello to your family. If they go in for a kiss and you don't feel comfortable, here's how you deal with that. If they ask for this, like, that's probably reasonable, but if you don't want to do X or Y, then that's okay. So you kind of think through it ahead of time. And it's almost a nice little bonding time as a family, because you go in, everyone has a plan, everyone has expectations, you know what's happening, and you don't have to worry about just being blindsided by these issues, because kids, you're never going to react properly when you're on the clock. You have to do these things ahead of time. Your kids are going to throw fly balls at you, but like, going in with kind of a battle plan is my best advice for that, because your kids go in confident. They go, okay, if this happens, like, I don't have to kiss so-and-so. Like, that's not uncomfortable. My youngest daughter is the biggest extrovert on the planet, but she likes a parent there. So it's like, we're in your corner. You will be within eyesight of us at all times. We'll make sure we can see you, so you're fine. And then within those parameters, she is just all over every relative there is. But if she loses sight of a parent, all of a sudden her confidence goes away.
Yep. That plan, sitting down with your kids and talking that plan out, I think that's a really empowering strategy. You're sitting down with your kids, you're letting them know that, hey, when you're living in a society, there are certain rules and there are different cultural rules with different cultures, but we can sit down and we can come up with a plan to deal with this. And you're showing the kid that you're respecting him or her, and you're respecting their feelings, and you're giving them, like you said, you're giving them strategies that they can use. And I think that's such a wonderful way to tell your kids that you respect them.
And it's also really, really helpful as a precedent to set for them later on, because part of the conversation is going to be what makes you comfortable. What are you willing to accept? What are you not willing to accept? What are your personal parameters? And if you transpose that later on, like I'll give one of my college friends, for example, before she went out to a party, she drank like crazy, but was totally fine all the time. She never was in unsafe situations. She never did anything she regretted later. And I asked her, how do you do that? Everyone else on our volleyball team was out drinking like crazy and they came home with horror stories and war wounds. She was like, no, before I have my first sip, I say, here's what I'm willing to do. Here are my lines. Here's what I'm not willing to do. Here are my limits. And she never broke a promise to herself. And that was all that mattered. So setting your kids up to go into a social event, whether it's a family function or a college party, saying, okay, what am I willing to accept? What behavior am I okay with? What behavior am I not okay with? You start out that trend with you dictating it to them, but teaching them to do it for themselves is going to save them a world of heartache later on.
What a brilliant strategy. And it makes perfect sense. Everybody who goes into a job interview kind of goes in with that same strategy. What kind of job do I want? What number do I need to get in order to accept this job? And so, yeah, what a great lesson to teach kids at an early age, so they can be prepared for every moment in their lives.
Yeah, one of the themes I do throughout both of my books, but especially Clean Your Plate, is trying to create behaviors in your kids that will persist well in the adult world. A lot of times we do stuff for the short term, and it feels like a short-term win, but it's really shooting ourselves in the foot in the long term, like the Target tantrum that every toddler has faced and every mother dreads. If you think of it in a short term, it's like you tell them to be quiet once, they go, hark, the maternal authority has spoken, and then they're silent and you win, and the old man shopping for flashlight claps as you walk out. But again, if you throw that kid into high school and there's someone whose opinion they crave, you don't want them to just say oh, the authority has spoken, I guess I will get in your shady white van. Mm-hmm. So teaching your kid how to operate within societal parameters in Target will create the same behavior. You have to whisper in a library, you have to speak at a reasonable tone. The art of knowing when not to push your luck with someone is going to help them, because they'll know not to mess with you in Target, but they can also know when not to ask their boss for a raise or a day off. So you kind of think of ways to handle toddler problems that will teach skills that will be worthwhile when they're 35.
Yeah. That's pretty much what this podcast was built on. Just that idea that the conversations that you need to have, those quote unquote conversations about the scary topics that you need to have with your kids when they're 15 and 16 and 17, the best time to start those conversations are when they're 1. Yes. And no, you're not talking about drugs with your 1-year-old, but you are talking about making choices and good decisions and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable and what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. And you are pretty wonderful, and we want you to make these great choices because we love you and we don't want you to hurt yourself.
Yeah, my husband and I always joke that you have the first 10 years to install the operating system, and then the next 10 years you get to see whether it works.
Hey, Dr. Liz, where can people go to find out more about you and your books?
My website is lizbayardelle.com. I'm sure the spelling is in the show notes somewhere because it's an impossibly long last name. You can see I have 3 websites that I run. The links are all there. There are blogs about parenting and developing yourself and failure, which is a pet project of mine for another time. And then links to my books and more information about there is also on the website. So if you go to lizbayardelle.com, you'll have all the stuff right in front of you.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to Dr. Liz Bayardelle, the author of Clean Your Plate, 13 Things Good Parents Say That Ruin Kids' Lives. Hey, Dr. Liz, thank you and your assistant for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Can you say bye? Bye.
We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Liz. We know you're going to love our chat with Steve and Selai. Before they join us, we would love for you to join us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. Be sure to check out our Reading With Your Kids podcast page on Pinterest, where we can also be found on LinkedIn. Of course, we would absolutely love it if you could go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and subscribe to our free newsletter. Joining us right now from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Our guests today are the authors of Bob the Banana Goes Bad. Please welcome to the show Selai Akbar-Hussain and Steve Petzinger. Steve, Selai, welcome to the Reading With Your Kids podcast.
Hi.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to have you both here. Steve, why don't I begin with you? I understand that you first had this story back when you were a youth, back when you were like 12 years old.
Yeah, actually, so I was 12 years old. I was in the 6th grade, and I read a lot of comics, and I just liked the kind of comics I thought were funny, like Garfield and The Far Side and a couple others. And I think I just had this project to write a sort of a short children's book. And I got the idea from a Far Side comic, and I thought it was just kind of, it was kind of just funny, kind of like almost a joke to me, like the characters being silly and everything. And then I guess it was a hit with some people, and my family preserved it over the years and urged me to bring it back and actually publish it.
Well, that's
many years later, decades later.
That's really cool. It's so cool that your mom loved the story so much that she saved it, and not only saved it in some box that was covered with cobwebs that she'd pull out, you know, when she met your kids, but you know, something that she really believed in and encouraged you to publish.
Yeah. I've always been really pretty creative, and I just loved doing things like that, and I think it made her happy to see me doing those kinds of things, and I think she wanted me to hang on to that, and my family, the rest of my family, kind of liked it as well. So
awesome. Well, Selai, I'm going to ask you to tell us about the story of Bob the Banana Goes Bad, but before I do, I just want to know how you came into this project, and what did you think when you first met Bob?
Well, it was really interesting when Steve's mom brought over the original Bob the Banana Goes Bad, and I read it. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was amazing, and it was nice to see something that Steve had written at such a young age with so much thoughtfulness, and he was so creative. The illustrations, the alliterations, everything, the humor. And it was around the time of COVID, around, I'd say May or something. I said, you know, maybe you should publish the book, you know, maybe now's the time. And it just seemed like the perfect time, actually, because we had free time. I wasn't working at the time. I was furloughed. My school had closed temporarily due to COVID. And I got to give him some advice on things that I thought would better the story. And so we collaborated and made it what it is today.
Awesome. And so tell us give us an idea of the story behind Bob the Banana Goes Bad, please.
the funny thing is, the way the story started when I originally wrote it ended up changing a good deal, actually a lot. So in the beginning, when the concept was that the banana going bad and the other foods getting concerned, and then Selai came and said, well, you know, Bob has to be the good guy in this situation. So he's going bad and has these concerns that he may not get picked by Mr. Abbott, and I guess his concerns and emotional ups and downs, and he's trying to cope with that, and the other foods are kind of helping him to I guess, to not give up on himself. So I think that the story, I guess, really turns into not just a story of not giving up on hope. And I guess that's the message we really want to bring in.
And support. I think it was really a key part of the story, too, was how all the other fruits and vegetables rallied around him to support him. And there's a lot to be said for community support. I think it's really important to teach children to be independent and everything, but to ask for help, to accept help, to be part of a community of people that are concerned and want your well-being is also a really good life lesson to learn. You know, it's easy to not give up hope when everybody believes in you, that you can do it. You know, that if you just hold on, that you will be picked one day too, like in the story. So it's not just perseverance on Bob's part, but it's also the people that were loyal to him and persevered as well.
Yeah. Steve, was it difficult for you as a creative person to have Selai come in and think, yeah, this is a really strong, but I think you should really change it and change it in this subtle but major way? Was that hard on your ego, or were you okay with it?
Well, it was a little hard at first because I thought it was I thought it was perfect in a way, you know. Of course, because I wanted the humor to be preserved, and all the innuendos and the personalities, maybe even of the fruits and vegetables. And I'm like, you can't alter the story really and still have that aspect be there. But it turns out I was really wrong about that. And when she turned it around and made it have a positive spin on it, then even though the plot turned around, the character and the quality of the story ended up being the same.
Yeah.
Well, I know folks are going to want to take some time to go online and meet you, find out more about both of you, and find out more about Bob the Banana Goes Bad. Is there a website that people can go to learn more?
Yes, you can go to bobthebanana.com.
I like that, bobthebanana.com.
We've had
we'll be doing book reviews in the near future. Some of our favorite books, children's books, that we would love to review for parents out there, for any avid children's book readers who have children or love to read themselves. We'll be doing book reviews, and there'll be a YouTube channel with coming out soon as well, where we read Bob to the children and other books. So we're excited. There's a lot of things that we're looking forward to doing.
Excellent. Well, we've had a great time speaking to the authors of Bob the Banana Goes Bad, Steve Petzinger and Selai Akbar-Hussain. My friends, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Dr. Stephen Gardner. He'll be here to celebrate Jabberwocky, a lesson of love from a boy who never spoke. It's a really, really powerful conversation. You don't want to miss it. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking all of our guests. Be sure to check out Clean Your Plate from Dr. Liz Bayardelle. Also want to thank the authors of Bob the Banana Goes Bad, Steve Petzinger, Selai Akbar-Hussain. I want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.